15-year-old Talia Porter walked into a bank with confidence, ready to deposit her first check. However, her experience quickly turned into a nightmare. Instead of being welcomed with kindness, she was treated with suspicion, ignored for hours, and isolated in a back room, as if she were a criminal. What no one at the agency knew was that Talia was the daughter of Celeste Porter, the bank's CEO. As news of the incident eventually spread, it caused a stir throughout the city. That day, Talia had carefully adjusted her backpack and stood nervously in front of the bank, preparing to deposit a $10,000 scholarship check, a symbol of her academic success and her first step toward independence. Although her mother had offered to accompany her, Talia insisted on handling it herself. Her mother, proud of her daughter's initiative, agreed but asked her to stay in touch. Inside the bank, the atmosphere was cold and formal. Talia clutched the envelope containing the check and joined the line. Since she was visiting a branch far from the main office, no one recognized her. That suited her fine, she just wanted to be treated like any other customer. When her turn came, a young employee named Derek politely greeted her. She handed him the envelope and tried to appear confident. Derek was visibly surprised by the amount and said he needed to call his supervisor for validation. Moments later, the agency manager, Claudette Sharp, arrived. She examined the check and documents with evident suspicion and barely concealed disdain. She questioned whether the check truly belonged to Talia and directed her to wait in a separate room while it was checked in more detail. As Talia waited, she observed how Claudette warmly greeted other, white, clients with smiles and efficiency. Time dragged on, first an hour, then 2, while no one came to update her. Despite receiving a message from her mother asking if everything was okay, Talia didn't mention what was happening. She wanted to resolve things on her own. But when she finally returned to the counter to ask about the delay, Claudette responded curtly, even threatening to call security if she didn't sit back down. Talia complied, feeling humiliated and diminished. She realized that the issue wasn't the check, it was her. She knew if the staff had known who her mother was, the situation would have unfolded very differently. Still, she refused to play that card. Instead, she took out her notebook and started documenting everything. She waited over 3 hours, hungry and anxious, too afraid to leave in case they used her absence as an excuse to deny the deposit. While watching the bank's operations, Talia noticed a clear pattern. White clients were treated with speed and kindness. When a Middle Eastern man entered, Claudette's demeanor changed instantly, dismissive and rude. Talia scribbled her observations, her hands trembling. She wanted to tell them who she was, but she didn't want respect based on her mother's title. She wanted it because she deserved it. After 4 hours, Claudette summoned a security guard who ordered Talia to follow him to a back room. When she asked why, the guard simply told her not to ask questions. She tried to defend herself, pointing out how others were served quickly, but the guard dismissed her coldly and hinted at calling security. Isolated in a small, oppressive room, Talia struggled to hold back tears. Instead of crying, she wrote. An hour later, Claudette entered with a man Talia didn't recognize. Claudette seemed surprised to see her still there and dismissed her as no one important. Talia stayed quiet, continuing to write while eavesdropping. The man, named Beckham, and Claudette began speaking in hushed tones. Talia heard snippets about Porter Enterprise, her mother's bank, acquisition plans, and confidential information. She realized that the mistreatment she had endured might not have been random, but part of something far more sinister. Claudette was leaking internal information to Beckham, who worked for Thorne Industries, a rival company planning to overtake Porter Bank. Claudette was promised a high-ranking position after the takeover. Talia's presence was an inconvenience, so they planned to keep her in the room until closing. Although afraid, Talia felt a rush of determination. She had just witnessed betrayal at the highest level, her mother's own employee was working against her. As Beckham dismissed Talia as irrelevant, she furiously documented every word in her notebook. When they finally left the room, Talia tried to contact her mother but had no signal. Frustrated, she continued writing, detailing not just the conspiracy, but also the discrimination and humiliation she had faced throughout the day. What began as a day of pride and independence for Talia Porter turned into something much greater. Her notebook, once reserved for homework, had become a crucial document holding evidence that could protect her mother's bank from betrayal. Nearly 2 hours after being locked in the back room, the door finally opened, but this time, it wasn't the guard or Claudette. It was Celeste Porter herself. Elegant and authoritative, Celeste immediately rushed to her daughter, overwhelmed with relief. She embraced Talia tightly, scolding her gently for not responding to messages. Talia, unable to hold back her emotions any longer, burst into tears and confessed how she had been ignored and mistreated all day. Celeste was stunned, and her expression darkened when Talia hinted at the real reason behind the discrimination. But Talia quickly revealed something even more serious. She had overheard a secret meeting between Claudette Sharp and Beckham Thorne, a major competitor, and had written down every detail in her notebook. As Celeste read through her daughter's notes, her expression shifted from surprise to controlled fury. Claudette had not only discriminated against her daughter but had also committed a grave act of industrial espionage. Celeste sprang into action. She called security and ordered that neither Claudette nor Beckham Thorne be allowed to leave the premises. She also summoned an emergency meeting with the board of directors. With her daughter at her side, Celeste marched through the bank. When Claudette saw her, she turned pale. Celeste confronted her directly, stating that Claudette had wrongfully detained her daughter and denied her service. When Claudette learned that the girl she had treated so poorly was the CEO's daughter, she tried to backtrack, calling it a misunderstanding. But Celeste wasn't done. She accused her of leaking confidential information to Thorne. Claustrophobic silence filled the room as Celeste placed Talia's notebook on the desk and cited the security camera footage as additional proof. Claudette was speechless, realizing the depth of her mistake. Celeste's voice, a perfect mix of calm and fury, called out her betrayal, not only against the bank but against its values. She reminded everyone that no one should be judged or mistreated based on identity or appearance. Talia, still holding her notebook, stood as a living testament to that principle. Board members arrived, and security escorted Claudette to a hearing room after she was formally suspended. As she was led away, she looked at Talia, no longer with contempt, but with regret. The girl she had dismissed had exposed her entirely. In the following weeks, a formal investigation confirmed Talia's account. Claudette had engaged in systematic discrimination and had passed confidential information to a rival company. Under Celeste's leadership, the bank implemented sweeping reforms. Security cameras were installed across all branches, and mandatory training on diversity and inclusion was introduced. The cold, oppressive atmosphere that once filled the bank began to shift. 3 months later, Talia returned to deposit another check, this time from an academic competition. The air was different now, warmer, respectful. What had once been a traumatic day had sparked a transformation. With her mother's support, Talia began leading talks in her school on financial literacy and systemic discrimination. Her story grew into a larger program, eventually sponsored by the bank itself. Speaking to her classmates, Talia emphasized that many people are still judged by their appearance, not their achievements. That had to change. Some students nodded in recognition, while others listened in eye-opening silence. She reminded them that change begins when people stop being silent, even if their voices tremble. Celeste watched proudly, seeing her daughter channel pain into purpose. The bank soon launched the Talia Initiative, a program to expand banking access for youth and minorities, including financial education and tailored investment options. At the program's launch, Celeste honored her daughter, stating that true institutional strength lies in values, not profits. Talia stood proudly with her old notebook in hand, which had transformed from a simple school tool into a symbol of justice. "This notebook started as a place for my homework," she said. "Then it held my pain. And finally, it held the truth." She reminded everyone that their stories matter, and they must be written. As applause filled the room, she turned the page and began writing a new chapter, not as a victim, but as a force for change. At every Porter Bank location, a plaque was installed: "Each person deserves respect and dignity. It is our commitment." Below that, in smaller letters, inspired by Talia Porter. The girl once dismissed and hidden away now had her name engraved in a space where no one would be treated as she was. Talia walked through the bank now with her head held high, notebook still in hand, not out of fear, but conviction. Each page reminded her that justice, however delayed, eventually prevails. Even the quietest voice can change the world when it refuses to be silenced. This story reveals that prejudice can still hide behind polished smiles and titles, but it also shows that courage, intelligence, and truth are powerful enough to change everything. Talia had entered the bank as just a student and emerged as a symbol of transformation.